Hi, thank you for joining us today for the Teaching the Children God Gave You session of our event. For this session, we're going to be explaining how to teach your children, no matter how many children you have, their ages, their learning styles, their abilities, and more. And we're going to explain how you can still teach all of them with Sonlight. So I am Sunny, I'm Sonlight's community manager, and I have been homeschooling 2 children since preschool. My kids, I have 1 girl, 1 boy, and they're 5 years apart with very different learning styles. So the way I teach them is very different, but we'll talk a little bit more about that as we dive in. First, I'd like to introduce you to my Sonlight mentors who are here with us today. We'll start with you, Anne, since you're on top. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about the kids that you homeschool?
All right, I am Anne, and I also have 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl. We started preschooling with homeschooling with preschool, is what I meant to say, back in 2007, and they are 3 years of age apart.
Well, perfect. Thank you for being here. And Jen, why don't you tell us about your homeschool and your kids?
Hi, I'm Jen. I have homeschooled 4 kids who are 3 and 4 years apart, so pretty big age gaps. I have 2 girls and 2 boys, and I, like you, Sunny, mine are completely different critters, so it took some adjustment.
Yeah, so that's one of the great things about homeschooling is that you really can teach to the students that you have. You're not locked into a classroom where, you have to kind of teach to a general middle, which is one of the great things about homeschooling. But let's talk about Sonlight. It's literature based, so that means you can use it with many kids or you can use it with just 1 or 2. How would your way of teaching maybe change a little bit if you've got, only 1 child, or maybe kids that are far apart in age versus kids that are all close together?
Well, one of the things we talk about a lot is combining. Like anything you can combine between your kids, just do Bible once with everybody, do history once with everybody. And my kids are just far enough apart and just different enough in style that did not work. So I combined almost nothing for 20 years, and it also worked beautifully. Combining works beautifully, not combining can also work beautifully.
I agree. I agree with mine being 3 years apart in age. We did combine science for a little while, and then it just got to be too much and split them apart. The only thing that we did all together all the time was Bible. Other than that, we did 2 levels of Sonlight to make to meet our needs.
Yeah, and I, again, same thing, because mine are 5 years apart. I had a baby when my daughter was in that stage where she was learning math and handwriting and reading and all of the things. And so she was, of course, way far beyond her brother by the time he was that age. So I've always kind of gone back and forth between my kids. But when my younger child was little, he was often in the room with us. So I joke that he's been homeschooled since birth because he was always around. But of course, I was not actively teaching him until he was older and ready for that. But like you guys said, subjects like Bible or science, even like the history, the HBL, those all lend themselves very well to being taught as a group. So if your kids are closer in age or closer in ability level, that might be something great, because you can learn those subjects, regardless. They're not skill-based like reading or math where you have to learn something else first. How do we usually suggest, like if you do want to combine kids, but they're not at the same level in like math and reading, how do we usually suggest that, even though we didn't really have that situation for us because of our age gaps? But how do we advise people that way if they are trying to figure out maybe like a kindergartner and a first grader, but they're at different levels?
Right. I think it's good to point out, like you mentioned before, there are skill-based subjects, and then there are subjects that don't have necessarily, any previous knowledge you have to know. You're just learning, as you go. So at Sonlight, we like to call those couch subjects and table subjects. And so those couch subjects are the history and the Bible and the literature and even the science books that you're reading aloud. So you can have a kindergartner, first grader, second grader sitting with you listening to those same books. And the skill-based subjects are typically the ones that you have to be at a table sitting up because you've got to be writing things, whether it's your handwriting or your language arts or your math. And you would choose whatever level for each individual child. So they do those separately.
And there are placement tests for so many of our skill-based curriculum pieces. So whatever, brand of math you choose, there's a placement test that you can give your child that will put them in the right book. And I joke with people at convention, it's a 2-step process. Let your child take the placement test and then believe the results.
Yeah.
Yes, that's very true. I think a lot of times as parents, we get excited, we want to push them ahead, but really pay attention to those results. I have found that they've been very accurate for my kids. Also, if you're kind of not sure how to interpret those results or what you should do, definitely reach out to us, because our advisors can help you place your kids. You two ladies are mentors, you're in our Sonlight Connections app. So we have a lot of options for people if they're like, oh, but my child reads at this level and they write at this level and their math, because we've been there, we can kind of tell you, oh, nope, that child should probably be here, or here's the HBL you might want to pick for these kids. That's our History Bible Literature. If you're unfamiliar with HBL as a term, that's kind of the center of Sonlight. But yeah, all of those things we can definitely help you with in the app, or contact our advisors through Sonlight's website. Let's talk about learning styles and abilities. So, of course, you've got different kids, different ages, different personalities, all of that, but kids learn very differently, and oftentimes they have very different abilities or strengths and weaknesses in different areas. So how do you teach to that? And then how do you know if you need to change something, if it's just not working the way you're doing it?
So one of the things that we hit was in math. And I have 2 children who can math in their heads really, really well. And they've always been able to do that. And I mean, every math teacher in the history of ever has said, you must write it out. You must do the work. You show me the work, show your work. You have to write it all out step by step by step. That's how we do it. And I fought that fight for a really long time until I accepted that they could math in their heads. They didn't have to write very much down at all, until they got to high school, at which point you have to write everything down, which is infuriating for this particular brand of child. But so the negotiation that we made was, if you can do it without writing it out, you don't have to write it out. However, if you don't write it out and I have nothing to look at and it's wrong, you have to do the whole thing over. If you write it out, like long division, and I can see it, I can circle the wrong parts and then you can just go back and fix from there. If you don't write it out, you are going to have to do the whole thing over. So pick which consequence you would like to deal with and choose your behavior accordingly. I have 2 other kids for whom that was never on the table. You have to write it out. And when we start getting all of them right, we'll talk again. Mm-hmm. And so, like, different kid, different method, different rule. I have 2 who like a whiteboard. I have 1 who hates a whiteboard. I have 1 who, like has to do it in pencil on lined notebook paper with the spiral on the side. And 1 who just kind of goes 13, negative 13, right? So you adjust. It's like anything else in parenting. There are 4 completely different critters. You learn to work with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Sonlight is literature based. So you might be led to think, well, that means, it's only an auditory type of curriculum, but it's really not. There's so much more. It's hands-on. You've got the science that has the experiments. You've got the hands-on kits or the lab books that you can add in to enhance, all the literature-based things you're doing. And then, of course, they are reading themselves. And so they get that visual part. So really, all different aspects of Sonlight can appeal to all different types of learners. And as to the question of, when do you maybe need to change something? I've never had to, change, like totally jump. Well, go backwards. Okay, math. I had to totally jump ship with math because spiral math, where the curriculum introduces something new every day, and then you review, learn something new, review. That worked great for elementary school. And then my kids hit this wall where it was just overload. I can't learn something new today. I'm not done with what I learned yesterday. And so we ended up switching to Math UC later on. And so as for the question, how do you know when you need to change though? When comprehension is not there.
Yeah.
if everything's working fine, there's no reason to just be switching back and forth to all different things. But when you see a problem with comprehension, and we saw that with math, and so we switched from a spiral curriculum to a mastery, and that fixed the problem. And I had one other instance that comes to mind where comprehension was a problem. We hit the level F. Speaking of, all of our Sonlight lingo, our packages are not grade leveled, they're lettered because they applied all different grade levels. So we were in level F doing the readers, and I would ask my son a question, and it was just deer in the headlights. Yeah, I don't know. Did I read that? And so I just tweaked it a little bit and let him see the comprehension questions first, so that then he would kind of know, it kind of helped him see what was going to go on in the book and be able to comprehend better. So there are lots of little ways to tweak things, and you realize you have to do that when you see that their comprehension's a little bit, not what you're hoping it would be.
And when we hit F, we had that same reader issue. And so what I did was I read aloud the first chapter or two. And then when I knew they knew what was going on, and they got like the when and where and who the characters were and what the problem was going to be, then they could read the rest of it and answer questions. But I kind of wanted to cement that, like, are you following this?
Do you know this?
Before I set them free. And it had never been a problem before. So I
Right.
had never thought to even, there was nothing to adjust because they were getting it. And then they weren't. And then as we moved on, like, it was fine again. So yeah, I only adjust when there's a problem. It's really fun to look at everything new curriculum every year, but like, that sounds exhausting to me. Just do the next thing, unless doing the next thing won't work. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes we're like, oh, this isn't working, I need to change it. But it might just be changing your approach a little bit, because I truly believe literature-based, everybody can listen to a story. Everybody can learn something from that. But the way their brain works and the way they understand it may be very different. My kids are so different that way. I have the one child who can give you all the facts, but can't read between the lines and give you the critical thinking piece. And then I have the other child who you don't think is listening at all, can't remember a single character name, but then he can tell you exactly what was going on in the story, and he can make all the connections that my daughter can't make. Another thing too with my kids, my oldest was very much, she's kind of the let's memorize stuff, we know the information, let's move on. She doesn't want to do a lot of hands-on things. She at one point was like, you're reading the read alouds too slowly. Can I just read them to myself? Versus my younger child, who has to touch and feel things, and he can't skip a science experiment. He loves the hands-on. He has to be moving while I'm reading, which means he doesn't want to read a lot himself because he's moving and the book's moving, and that's hard. And so, I've learned that, I thought I had it all figured out. And then when the other child came along, I was like, oh, I need to change my approach entirely. We need to do hands-on with this kid. We need to, let him move around while he's learning. And, instead of doing all the questions with him, I let him tell me what he heard, because he's horrible at remembering the detail pieces, but he can tell you what's going on in the story. And so, it's been very much this child's not getting it this one way, so let's try something different, but still within our Sonlight, we'll add in the hands-on. We won't skip experiments with him, all of the different things like that. And same thing, I love what you said, Ian, with the math, and Jen with the math. Like, the kids, they can usually do the mental math in elementary school, and then as it gets harder, long division and above, it's like, oh wait, there's too many steps now. Even if they can kind of do it, that might be where you have them start writing it, or maybe you start with them writing it, and then you're like, oh no, this child doesn't need all that. But I love what you said. My daughter's doing physical science right now, so there's more math involved in that. And if she circles the wrong answer and leaves me no work, then you missed the whole thing. But if you leave me some work there, I can figure out, okay, did you get part of this? What's going on? So, again, changing your approach for that child as they get older too is super helpful in the way they learn. But let's talk about the personality and behavior. We see a lot of questions online. My child won't do their work, or they're loud and disruptive to the other kids, or I don't think this child's listening to me at all. How does the personality and the behavior play a role, and what can you do, especially if you have multiple kids and you are finding that one or more is a major distraction to the other kids?
Yeah, every situation is a little bit different, so it's a little bit hard to kind of make a blanket statement, about what to do. But I think it has a lot to do with well, kind of life skills, learning to get along with people, interact with people, and if you personalities are so different. I only have 2 kids, but one loves to work in her room where it's secluded and quiet, and the other never, ever, ever has he done, a thing in his room until he got to college. And then he started doing his work in there. But all of his homeschool stuff was just out where everything was happening. And he just did not want to be all by himself. So you can definitely have conflicts with these sorts of things. But it's just kind of a give and take, and just communication and understanding who needs what. And even working out when you do, certain subjects, and it's just a big old juggling act that you just have to work together to figure out.
And I mean, I have, double the kids that each of you guys has.
Mhm.
And so I will tell you that if you're going to homeschool a lot of kids, it very well might take all day. And
Yeah.
I have one that's a morning person, and the rest of us wonder where she came from. And so it is not unusual for me to have, I mean, over the years, a kid on my bed, 10:30 at night, like, Mom, can you help me with this map? Yes, I'd love to. I've been parenting now for 16 hours, but I would love to map with you at 10:30 at night in my pajamas. Yeah, let's go. And I mean, we read when we have time, and we work when we have time. And so like yesterday was a rainy weekend day where I live, and we read because a rainy Saturday is worth a sunny day at the end of the year, and we're getting really
Mhm.
close. And so, my son knows that like any reading we get done now is going to take that much time off the end of the year. And so we just have always had to be flexible. I've had kids who were so distracting that I was like, let's move you to the porch. We're going to work on the porch today. And we had a, big, beautiful farmhouse porch on an actual farm. And so like, that was just another room in the house. And so he could sit on the swing, and he could creak it back and forth and not drive anybody else crazy. And, that was how we did it. And so you just
Mhm.
adjust. Like, it's pretty much like just an extension of parenting. The same
Yep.
way that, one kid is going to fight you about their least favorite vegetable, or this one needs 15 minutes notice to put her shoes on if we're leaving the house. And the other
Right.
ones are like, let's go, let's go. And you just adjust for those children, and it's the same.
Absolutely. You learn which child has to do math first, or
Yes.
else, the rest of the day will be a disaster. Sometimes you have to just get a certain thing done first. And I have seen pictures, people will post things, and I've seen pictures of a whole table full of kids all doing their, skill-based subjects at the same time. And I'm like, I have 2, and I can do that.
Oh,
Never
I
ever.
don't think that's ever happened in my house in 20 plus years. I've
Yes.
never accomplished the everybody at the table thing ever. So
No, it just does not work. And sometimes it's because, talking about the different personalities, if you've got a competitive child, then the whole thing is, oh, well, I'm going to finish, first or something like that. Then that creates all these problems and things. So I learned a long time ago just to take turns when it comes to those skill-based subjects. And talking about how none of us have combined necessarily, but when it's read aloud time for one level, guess where the other child is?
they
They're
all
listening.
come.
Yeah, they all come. So they're just getting double or triple the education, because they're all listening. So that's never been a problem to have everybody together for that time, for those couch subjects. But for those table subjects, that takes a little tweaking sometimes. And if you're pulling your hair out trying to have them all do it at the same time at the table, because it seems like it'll save time. Honestly, taking turns has been a lifesaver for us.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I love what you said about the read alouds too, because my kids, they will, especially my older one wants to come back and hear stories that she read when she was younger, or if a new book has been added to a program, she wants to hear that one. So read aloud does oftentimes become family time, but I have found the more flexible I can be the easier it is to teach the kids that I have. I'm very much a type A perfectionist. I love a great schedule and checklists and all the things, but I quickly learned that was not going to do anything except frustrate me when my kids were not on that same schedule that I had outlined in my mind that only I had to worry about. No one else cared if I was doing that. But for me, it was like, oh, I've got to accomplish this. But I quickly learned, like, oh no, sometimes kids are cranky or somebody has something going on, when they were very little, like this is not going to work. And then as they got older, Jen, you mentioned staying up late at night doing school. That is my oldest child. That is her favorite time to do school, is in her bed at night. She will tell us during the day, well, you guys are too loud, you're a distraction, I don't want you around. And so she really does like to stay up late at night and do most of her school in her room. And then I drag her out in the afternoon and say, okay, let's talk about what you've done. Do you need help with anything? And I mean, she is at that high school age now where she can do that. But even my younger child, he will be all over the house, wherever he wants to work. And I tell him, here's what you need to do on your own, and then I'm going to work with you at this time. So it's up to him. He can take all day doing his school if he wants to, but if he wants to go play or wants to do something fun, he knows, well, I can be done with school early, or I can be done, and go play with the neighbor kid who happens to be home, or, whatever it is. So yeah, kind of watch your kids and see how their personalities are. Do they like being around people? Do they not? When we are all together, if we're all in the car or we're traveling or something, noise canceling headphones are what my kids like to use so that they can actually sit next to each other without looking at each other or talking to each other or distracting each other. And I actually got clipboards for each kid with their name on it. So that way they can go outside or anywhere. They don't have to be at a desk or a table, and they can still write and do that type of stuff. So there's easy ways like that to kind of modify how they learn. The only thing I have is if I need quiet and you need to be loud, because I have one child that likes to listen to music, go away and do that somewhere else. But yeah, we do a lot of, like Jen, you said, going out to the porch, go outside, go upstairs, you can hang out in here if you're not distracting everybody else. But yeah, I agree. The whole everybody around the table at once, that has only happened successfully with noise canceling headphones or people eating. If we're eating, then everybody's getting all involved. So yeah, pay attention to that, and give your kids some buy-in in what they're doing. If they're doing independent work, let them do it on their schedule. Even when I'm doing work with the kids, I usually let them choose the order that we go in. I'll stack up the books and say, okay, what do you want to do first? And that usually keeps them a little more engaged too, if they get to make some decisions. So I gave you guys a lot of information and how I kind of cater to everyone. Do you guys have anything to add on making sure that each child maybe gets enough time? Because I know sometimes that's a worry, like if this child needs a lot of help, but this child's doing pretty well on their own, so you're not checking in with them as much. How do you make sure that everybody truly is getting an equal share of the time or what they need to successfly get their work done?
I could never make that happen on a daily basis. Like everybody gets enough of mom every day. I'm sure there are moms out there who can do it. I mean, I refer to myself as the okayest mom ever. There's no way I could ever make that happen. But on a rotating basis, like if I know I kind of had to ignore you yesterday because something else happened, you're first on my agenda today. With the exception of toddlers, because if you ignore toddlers, they will make you pay for it. But like, especially the high schoolers, they get so independent, and then you're like, have we talked? Like, do I even know what you're doing? And so I try to keep a rotating basis. Like I might get to everybody today, but if I don't, the kid I skip today is first on my agenda tomorrow. And that way, at least every day or so ish, we, everybody gets the attention that they need. Everybody gets their math corrected. Everybody gets caught up with what we're reading or what we're discussing or whatever.
Yeah, I like that. It's like a loop schedule, but with your kids.
Yes. It's the not enough mom to go around loop scheduling hack.
Yeah. What worked for me with like I said, just two, but the taking turns thing, It was just an understanding, and you have to set your expectations of what you're expecting right away, and you don't budge from those, or things can't stay like you want them. So the rule kind of was, if it's not your turn, you don't come talk to me. You've got to wait until I'm done with whatever I'm doing with, your brother or your sister. And that worked out great, because then they realize, oh, I can go read this book that I want to read for fun, or I can go build my Legos, or, whatever like that. And so it worked great for them to have those little breaks throughout the day when I was working with the other. So that was a good balance. And this is kind of a random thing. I'm not sure exactly where it fits in, but I just wrote it down. So I think it goes back to one of those personality things. And math again, we all want our kids to know all of their, multiplication facts and addition facts and all this stuff. When you're teaching that kind of thing, personalities make a big difference, because oftentimes it'll call for a timer. And that kind of thing stressed one of my children out to no end. Like they could learn all the facts, but put the timer, like, no, that just can't happen. And so even though it suggested to do that, we never did. And it all turned out okay. So lots of little personality things happen like that. So yeah.
Well, and I think what you said, it turned out okay, right?
Yes,
what
exactly.
First grader is doing now, yes, it matters, but it's not going to ruin the rest of their education if they aren't reading it 5-6 years old, if they don't have all their math facts down. I think oftentimes as homeschool parents, we get, oh no, little Johnny next door knows way more than my child does. Am I doing something wrong? And we have to remember that kids do learn and develop at their own level, and oftentimes in different subjects at a different pace too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and with bigger families, one of the tricks that I learned from a homeschool mom who went before me is to schedule a meeting. Like, Sunny, you are a full-time working mom of homeschooling children, and you know that in your workday, if somebody says, hey, I need you, we need to follow up on whatever, you're not like, oh, let me interrupt what I'm doing right now. You're like, can I call you at 3? Can I call you at 3:10? Whatever. I will have a slice of time between this and this. And I sometimes did that with my kids. Like, so you need my full attention for a thing. Can I talk to you at 8 p.m.? Can we do this while the baby is in the bathtub? Like, come into the bathroom, bring your things. I will have my eyes on him and my brain on you. Will that work? And so, sometimes you can't get to everybody right this second, but scheduling things out like they are respected coworkers. And there's only one of you to go around, which at work we accept and at home we feel guilty about. That scheduling a meeting really worked for me a lot of times, even when I was like, there's not enough of me to go around.
Well, and you brought up bath time. Remember, I love to remind people, I think for some reason we're locked into school happens Monday through Friday, 8 to 3. That's the only time it can happen. When you homeschool, you can do it whenever you want to. Jen, you mentioned working on the weekends too. That's something that I do because I work during the week. Usually Sunday afternoon, we go through everything from the week before that we didn't get to during the week. But yeah, when you're homeschooling, you get to set the schedule and you have 24 hours a day in which you need to get all your things done. So whether that means people stay up later and get school done, if that means you're a morning family and you get up early, but you do not have to limit it to school hours. Absolutely. Also, because of that, you can rely on dad a lot of the times too. I think as homeschool moms, oftentimes we think, oh, I've got to do it all. Well, dads are great at explaining math concepts, doing science experiments, reading a book, anything that they may want to be a part of. I know my husband is our science experiment dad, and every weekend he and our son do their science experiments together because he enjoys that more than the reading, and I like the reading more. And so we just kind of split it up and see what we can both do. But it gives me a little bit of a break because now I don't have to worry about doing that. Now I can work with our older daughter or, whatever we're doing. So look at all the hours in your day and all the people in your life that can help you with this. But what do you do if you've tried to outsource some of that, or you tried to, change your schedule or modify things, but what do you do if you still feel like you're failing? Jen, you brought up a great point that the way we act outside our home is very different than when we're the mom and we think we have to do it all. But what do you do in that situation?
So one of the things that I learned over 20 plus years of doing Sonlight, that people don't always want to believe, but I absolutely can verify that this is true. Sonlight is so full. There is so much reading. There are so many books. There are so many science experiments. There are so many papers to write. There are so many language arts assignments. If you only do 75% of it, that is still an amazing, full, complete, rigorous education. Now, I'm not a book skipper myself, but I have done it. And I have, like, in the moment you feel guilty, but then, like, my kids in their 20s are readers. They are literate. They are culturally aware. They can string a sentence together. They can string a paper together. They can do their own accounting. They can do their own math. They are functional adults. Even though we skipped books, even though we didn't always do every chapter or every assignment. And so if what you are doing feels like too much, cut back, guilt-free. I mean, you have to do science. They really need to write. You need to do math pretty much continuously. But there is a lot that can be cut back, and it is okay. They will be okay. It's the educational equivalent of being like, vegetables. They need vegetables. Do we feed everybody a vegetable at every meal? No. Because if you get enough over the course of a week, or, you know, if like they didn't eat their vegetables, but they ate the entire plate of watermelon, like, okay, that is good enough. It's enough. Even though it's not perfect, it is enough. And so that is my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's a great 2 cents. And I agree. You have to keep the, you know, the end picture in mind. You know, day to day, you can feel like you're just slogging through it, but just take a step back and look at the progress that you've made. And I think the time that I felt most like a failure when my kid could not do the language arts assignment as written because he was supposed to write something. And I'm just like, he can't do it. So what did I do? I reached out to people. So this is a top tip for sure. When you are feeling like you are a failure at this, go find some other moms that are homeschooling. Go to the Sonlight app. What I did way back in the day when this happened to me, I went to the Sonlight forums, which was an online thing that there used to be. And I said, my kid can't do this. What is wrong? What do I need to do? And well, first you find out that everybody else has been there. You are not the only person that this has ever happened to. And then second, there's a solution. And the solution was to serve as his scribe because he was just in the 2nd grade and he could not, you know, put together what he was thinking. And I just kind of thought he was supposed to, you know, I taught high school biology. I didn't teach elementary school kids when I was a teacher. And so just knowing that everybody else had been there and that, no, he doesn't have to be able to do that. Yeah, you can do such and such until he's ready. And then I just love talk about the, you know, not focusing on what's happening right now. Okay, fast forward to years in the future when he's in high school. He served as the scribe, the person who took all the minutes, all that stuff for his Boy Scout troop for several different terms. So I'm just saying, you can feel like you're just slogging through things sometimes, but stick with it. Reach out for all the people. We are here to help you, and you'll see that it is going to be okay.
It is going to be okay.
I love that. Yeah. When you get into the community, that's actually how I discovered that the range for what is considered normal to learn to read is so wide. I had one child that read at 4 and one at 8, and both fall within that normal range. But I was a little panicked about the one that was 8. And I was like, why does this child not read like the other child read? And so, yeah, you get in there and you realize, oh, that's totally normal. And now, spoiler alert, now that they both can read, you can't tell that, oh, that child took longer. And like you said, your son learned to write and wrote so well that he was able to take the minutes and the notes as he was older. So yeah, when you're in those early elementary years, to me, those are the hardest because the child is learning everything oftentimes for the first time. They've never read before, they've never done math, they've never written anything. And they all learn at a different level. But when you hear from other parents, oh, okay, yeah, one child did this, one child did that. Oh, that's totally normal. it's incredibly reassuring to be like, oh, okay, I'm not just the only one who can't teach, because all these other people who have successful kids, they were able to teach them. So yeah, so I absolutely agree. Reach out to the community. Also, don't set expectations expecting your child to be an adult or think exactly like you do. I've been guilty of that with my very mature child, where I had these expectations that that child would react the way I would to a situation. And obviously I'm an adult. So remember that, don't set such high expectations. If you're a perfectionist like I am, you have a tendency to want to do that because you put high standards on everything. But remember, your kids are their own people. So teach them, don't teach yourself or any of that. But yeah, definitely reach out to other people when you need help. And like Jen, you mentioned all the books, even if you are not using Sonlight the way it is written or the way it's supposed to be, which again is very loose because it's highly customizable, you're still reading way more than the average person does. I know my daughter and I we were curious. We looked up honors English at the local school for her grade. And the honors English class, they were only going to read 7 books this year. And then we looked at our shelf and I haven't even counted them up, but I was like, you are reading way more than 7 books this year. So yeah, even if you don't get to everything, you're still doing probably at least as much or more than kids going to school are. So yeah, so that's what I like to think of. Jen, were you about to say something there?
My aha moment, I sent my son to public high school for 2 years. And when we went to like back to school night, he got the syllabus for honors English 10 from his English teacher. And it had a book list on the top of it. And he said to her, "Is this for the first quarter?"
And it was
and I was like, turn your homeschool off when you're in public, honey. But like that moment made me realize that we are reading so much. They are writing so much. They are doing math and handwriting and phonics and all of those things so consistently that it counts for more than I was thinking. Like I was thinking we were struggling to keep up. And then looking back on it, I realized we were rocking it.
Yeah. Yeah, and because they're discussing with you, they're learning things at a greater depth too, I think, than you often do in school, where you're just memorizing and taking tests and forgetting things, because they're also hearing your perspective, you're hearing what they have to say, they learn to develop those critical thinking skills. Yeah, there's just so many things that even if you can't get to everything, they're still getting a great education and you are still able to provide that for them. Before we wrap this session up, do you guys have any last advice or tips for people watching?
Well, one of my top things to keep in mind is be flexible. You know, like we've been talking about this whole session, you know, your kids are all unique. They, but they're yours and you know them best. And so just be flexible with the homeschooling thing. Like Sunny said, you don't have to do things at certain times or whatever, make it work with your schedule. And if you see some other homeschooling family and the way they do it and the way you do it is different, that doesn't mean you're wrong. There's no such thing as that. You know, you're just doing it a little bit differently. And that is totally fine because you are the expert of your kids and your family, and you know what will work best for them. And so you can absolutely make that happen.
Yeah, I think I love that, Anne. I think my advice would be to give them credit for the things they are showing you that they're doing. I had one kid who could answer all the comprehension questions, which I thought was the way that you proved you were listening to your mom read. And I had another one who would be like, "Henry, is he in this book? What?" And I was so discouraged until somebody pointed out to me that that child gasped and laughed at all the right places. And I was like, you know what? He's paying attention. He just doesn't retain names.
Yeah,
But like he knows the story, he gets like what that letter in the mail meant. He get, you know, where the other kid, like you said, Sunny, she was like, she received a letter in the mail. How am I supposed to know what was in it? And the kid who wasn't paying attention was like, oh my gosh, it's that thing. So yeah, I mean, but you got to give them credit for that. They're not all going to look the same. They're not all going to express it the same way. They're not all going to like get the same things out of the reading. And that's okay because they're unique. And that is part of the reason we homeschool is to customize. So when they have customized responses, you kind of got to remind yourself to go with it.
Yeah, and enjoy that because it is really fun to see things click and see how your kids are interpreting information differently than you do. Even like, I just kind of assumed, everybody kind of they think the way I do, or they learn the way I do. And then having two kids, one who's kind of similar-ish and one who doesn't learn at all like I do, it's been really interesting and fascinating for me to see like, oh, they got this in a way I didn't get this, and the way this person didn't get this. And so it's fascinating and it's fun.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have a good time together. And like Anne said, you love your kids more than anybody else does. So you are motivated by the fact that you want what's best for them. So you're already doing more than a lot of other people could even come close to, just by spending that time with them. So yeah, just enjoy it. As the uptight personality, sometimes I want to rush through and I have to remind myself that, but it truly is so fun when you see those light bulbs click and when you form those relationships with those kids that you may not have had you not been reading this book together, have that common ground. So enjoy it. If you need help, though, of course, the advisors and the mentors are here for you. We've mentioned that several times, but do reach out to us. You can join us in the Sonlight Connections app or our Sonlight Connections group on Facebook. You can contact us at sonlight.com/contact. And that way you can get in touch with the advisors or customer service if you need help, identifying your package or something like that. But here at Sonlight, we pray for you daily as well. So if you have prayer requests or just need encouragement, let us know that, because we want to help you out with your homeschool. And Jen, thank you so much for being here and sharing all you had or all you did today. I found it very encouraging, and hopefully others listening also got that as well. So thank you so much for being here.